The Marshal Service in Sherman has been helping us from day one, from June 8th when this homicide occurred. And we've been diligently working for 3 weeks with Ranger John Vance and the Criminal Investigation Division of DPS and the Marshal Service. And we were able to track Tilton maps to Fort Smith, Arkansas. And Ranger Vance and I left yesterday morning, arrived a little bit before noon. Marshal Service had already set up surveillance on an area of town there at Fort Smith where we suspected Tilton maps was at. They orchestrated a surveillance gauntlet, if you will. And one of the things that was I don't know if interesting would be the word, but that happened on the end of Mr. Maps is the people that were coming out of the apartments that were helping him, and I'll address that in a minute. And their little sophisticated system of him being able to elude the police. Well, a long story short, they had put a decoy car, picked up a subject that was not our murder defendant, left in it, wanting us to follow that vehicle. We did, but only a few of us. And then a second vehicle came, and that's where Tilton Maps jumped in it, laid down in the back seat, and pulled a pink swimming pool floaty over him in an attempt to hide. The Marshal Service, along with Fort Smith PD, took him down. We got him in custody, was able to identify him through tattoos, and then he, of course, admitted who he was. About 10 or 15 minutes later, we had warrants on his girlfriend, Tressa Macon, for hindering apprehension not long after the homicide here in Sulphur Springs. And she was found in an apartment there in Fort Smith, and she was taken into custody for a felony hindering apprehension. Just a good coordinated effort between the Marshal Service and Sherman, and then handing it off to their counterparts in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And when we got there, just everything came together, and we were able to get him and his girlfriend in custody. We interviewed both of them afterwards, and Tilton admitted to shooting Jonathan Young back on June 8th at Pacific Park.
Did he give any reason for the shooting? Or?
Well, we're probably not going to release that at this point. There's still some investigation going on as far as that motive and all that, but he did admit to shooting him. Of course, we think about the surviving family now. You know, it's a good day anytime you can get a murder defendant off the street, but it's not one that we celebrate, because we think about the family who's still going through a journey, if you will. And but we're glad to get him and his girlfriend off the street.
I'm sure you don't want to get into too many specifics, but you could just, I'd say, developed information, I guess, that he was in Fort Smith through your investigation and other techniques.
I'm going to go back to June the 8th. The Marshal Service here in Texas, we reached out to them, Ranger Vance and I did, and they have been on this case for 3 weeks with us. Of course, their end of it was not the investigation of the homicide itself, it was just the apprehension of Tilton Maps. And those guys, I can't say enough good things about them. Some of their technology and their expertise, because this is what they do day in and day out. They seek out fugitives. And one of the things we're looking at, we've got to talk about with to Will Ramsey, our prosecutor, and perhaps reach out to the United States District Attorney in Arkansas, is the possibility of filing some charges on Maps for crossing state lines to avoid prosecution. That's something that we're going to look at in the coming weeks as some additional charges to put on him.
Was he armed when he was arrested?
No, was not armed.
And did not resist or anything?
Well, yeah, he didn't resist as far as fighting. He did try to flee.
Oh.
It was unsuccessful because he was laying down in that back seat of the car, and they had took off. We had enough Fort Smith, Arkansas PD units in a outside perimeter that a vehicle pursuit would not have lasted very long, but the way the Marshal Service swarmed that black car when it left the apartment complex, it was there was nowhere for him to go, and you know, one of those deals that you're caught.
Yeah.
So,
any other charges you anticipate in this case as you continue your investigation?
just the one, possibly with the federal prosecutors up in Arkansas. Now, we did arrest his girlfriend, Tressa Macon, on the hindering apprehension charge, and we were looking at some other people, filing some felony charges on them for assisting and harboring a fugitive, or in the Texas case, hindering apprehension. We take great exception to those that harbor and assist wanted felons and eluding police. It makes apprehending them harder, obviously, but also puts the public in danger. I mean, anytime you have a violent offender like Tilton Maps out there on the street, he's already killed, and that was always our concern. And thankfully, after 3 weeks, we can at least take a sigh of relief on that.
Sound like you had quite a network of help.
It was, you know, anytime you cross state lines into another state's law enforcement, I mean, we're all a brotherhood, but each agency, and then you start talking about local police departments and federal agencies getting involved. Most of us had not met before yesterday, but it's like we had trained together. I mean, it just all came together, and maybe some divine intervention.
The marshals kind of led this effort.
Yes, they led the effort. They were, I think the Marshal Service in Sherman were disappointed they weren't given travel privileges to go be involved in the takedown. But those guys were the nucleus of how this happened yesterday. It was 3 weeks in the making, and those guys were very instrumental in us getting Tilton Maps and his girlfriend into custody.
The takedown itself, probably Fort Smith kind of led that effort.
Actually, the Marshal Service and John Vance and I were right there. The Fort Smith. Now, they did have some detectives. I say that, yeah, they did have some plainclothes detectives there on the takedown as well. But then their marked units were, you know, around the area in case there was a vehicle pursuit or a foot pursuit.
What about extradition at this time?
Both Tilton Maps and Tressa Macon will have an extradition hearing sometime in the coming days or week, and depending on if they fight extradition, it'll take a little bit longer to get them back to Texas. If they waive extradition, then at some point some deputies from the Hopkins County Sheriff's Department will go to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and pick them up and bring them back here for some justice.
That sounds complete to me. Anything else to add? I know you're a happy guy today.
Well, we're glad to get him off the street, and his girlfriend as well. You know, the investigation is continuing, but it's anytime you can. That was always the problem here for these last 3 weeks. Not only were we working the homicide, which is a daunting task in and of itself, several agencies involved, but we had the additional stress of our bad guys still out on the streets eluding us, and you know, needing to get him into custody. Some homicides we get cases that we make an arrest quickly. Took 3 weeks on this one, but no one hurt, no bad guys hurt on the arrest, no police officers hurt, no civilians hurt. So it was a good Monday.